G'day guys, and welcome to another Oz Pajero Life how-to video. Today we're going to run through lining the torsion bars up to give you a bit of lift in the front end of the Gen 2 Pajero. Do me a favour guys, I wouldn't normally ask, but if you could like and subscribe, it goes a long way to keeping the channel alive. So how does a torsion bar work? So a torsion bar suspension uses a torsion bar as its main weight bearing spring. One end of the long bar is attached firmly to the vehicle via the lower control arm. The opposite end terminates in the adjuster arm, and this is mounted perpendicular to the bar. The vertical motion of the wheel causes the bar to twist around its axis and is resisted by the bar's torsion resistance. Yeah, so I've lifted this 2 inches myself. I've got the 33-inch tyres on there with the -22 rims, 15-inch rims. And I don't get any scrubbing at all, apart from full lock. I get a little bit of scrubbing just on there. You can see it's just a little bit, but that's only at full lock, like when I'm coming out of the driveway or something like that. But that's been perfect, so the 2 inches is enough. I wouldn't recommend going any further than that. I'm going to suggest guys, probably the first point of call would be to spray some WD-40 up there on the nut and the bolt in order to just loosen that all up. So that'd be the first thing I do before I do anything else, to give that time to penetrate the thread. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick two static points. It's usually the hub or the top of the rim and the guard, to get a measurement to see where we're currently sitting. So it's pretty hard to do with one hand, but I'll give it a go. So I'm going to go the guard, so we're about, the rim, so we're about 370. Okay, so I've jacked it up and stuck it up on the wheel stand, taken the wheel off. Now you normally don't have to take the wheel off. I've just taken it off just so I can give you a better look at what's happening inside when we're talking about bump stops and the like. And so I just got a better access to it. But normally, as I say, you don't need to take the wheels off. You just need the wheels off the ground, and you need to have the hub itself at full droop. Okay, so there's nothing holding it up. I mean, axle stands are probably safe enough, but just for that safety aspect, you'd probably leave the wheels on. That way, if anything did happen, it would just drop on its wheel. Okay guys, so you can see now that I've cracked the lock nut and I've actually unscrewed it. I'd reckon 1.5 inches or so, just to give me that space to be able to adjust the bolt. So the lock nut and the nut itself and the bolt here are all 17mm, so you'll need to arm yourself with a good couple of spanners to be able to crack the lock nut and hold the nut in place at the same time. And also you'd want yourself a nice socket, 17mm socket, preferably a ratchet gun. So what will happen here is, if I undo this bolt, it's going to drop this lever down, so that decreases the amount of lift you have. But if I was to do that up and push this lever up inside the cross member here, then it increases the lift. Okay, so down to decrease, to raise this arm up is to increase. So what I'm about to do here, so I've got the rattle gun and I'm just, again, it's hard to do with one hand, but essentially what I've done is I've just placed the spanner up on top there and just rested it up against the chassis and that to keep it in place, and I'm just undoing it now. So what I'm doing is I'm lowering this, you're decreasing the amount of lift. So, and when I do it up, it obviously has the reverse effect. So I've actually lowered that down significantly already. This back up again, so I'm going to do this up, right, and bring it back up to where it was before to give me that, I've got a 2-inch lift. Okay, so I'll do that now. I'll try and do that with one hand and see how we go. So as you can see now, that arm's coming back up. Okay, so I'll finish that up. Just don't forget to nip that lock nut back up when you've done. I'm still bottoming out here on the bump stop, because as you can see, I've had to trim it. So if you're going to lift these up, so you're not constantly on the bump stops, you need to trim them to give yourself a bit of distance between this bracket here and the bump stop, to give you that down travel. Otherwise it's just like driving around on a bloody rubber ball. It just bounces up and down and up and down, like that's the car, not this here. So what it does is, doing that puts stress on this area in here, can cause fatigue, and it can actually lead to cracking and so forth. So really, look, there's those that will say that, you know, never ever to do this, and probably any reputable suspension dealer would say that's just not on. But loads of people do it. I've done it on a couple of my vehicles. I've never had any issues, but I've always trimmed them to the maximum I can, and I don't wind them up. Like I just get my 2 inches and then I stop there. Whatever, you know, I don't try for anything more than that. Even less if I can. The other thing we've got to be wary of, guys, is the CV angle. So again, I know this is at full droop, but it gives you an example of you know, what the CV angle looks like. So by winding up the torsion bars, it increases this CV angle here, and you can, in certain driving conditions, can actually foul the rubber boots, and you can put stress on the CV itself, and can cause premature you know, damage to them. Again though, it's only in certain driving conditions. Again, I've never had any issues with that, and I've actually installed the Asin lockable hubs, or lockable. So at the moment, so you can see they're free spinning. So when this actually turns, so if I try and get you, so see the CV's not moving. So I'm actually not using the CV, and the drive line's not engaged while I'm just driving, and not under four-wheel drive circumstances. So if, you know, recommendations would be to get yourself a set of Asin locking hubs, and just be wary of that CV angle. So yeah, so again over here you can see the bump stops are hitting. They won't be hitting when I put the weight back on the wheel. I will give myself I will get that 1 inch back of space, and I reckon that's not too bad. It drives okay. The ride quality is a bit more springy, because you're winding up the torsion bars, you're putting more torsion on them. You know, so the other thing you consider is the shock absorbers. So I've bought some extended shock absorbers, so these are 2 inches longer than normal ones. They're only cheap. Do yourself a favour and get some good quality ones. Don't go the cheap option like I did, because that'll only improve your ride quality by getting proper gas shock absorbers. So now she's back down on the wheels, guys. You can see that CV angle there now, so it's a little bit extreme. The other thing is, you'll notice that there's no distance between the bump stops and that bracket that comes out. So what I've done there is I've lifted it too high. I reckon if I was to measure that, I reckon she'd be more than what I started with from the rim to the top of the guard. So I'm going to relax that off a bit. Obviously gone a bit too far. By the way, you'll probably notice that the bottom bump stop has been trimmed. Don't do that. I don't know who did that. It was obviously the person before me who had the car, but there's never any need to trim the bottom bump stop. I don't know why that was done. Yeah, so I'm just over on the driver's side now, guys, and you can see the distance I've got there. So it's between the bump stop and the bracket, so it's about 1 inch or so. That's where I have it, and that works fine for me. So I hope the wind's not playing havoc with this recording, guys, but it's pretty blowy today, and I'm struggling to stay out of the wind. But anyway, so what did I find? I found that it wasn't actually, I did take that back to where it was supposed to be, but I guess I measured both sides and I found that one side was up higher than the other. So so the driver's side had sagged a bit, probably because, you know, I'm always in the car by myself pretty much, driving it around. So that torsion bar obviously sagged a little bit over time since I last did this, because I've already done this once. So I've had to take this off a bit further. So I didn't stuff it up, it's just I didn't, well I did I guess. You could say I did because I didn't measure both sides, so you should always measure both sides to make sure they're equal. So this one's just relaxed off a little bit further. But in saying that though, I did notice that that side over there was a little bit lower than this side here when I first started, so that was probably the telltale sign that they weren't even to start with. I just didn't check it when but then I'm only doing this as an example, so I didn't really need to touch it, to be honest. So anyway, all good. So I've rectified that, and now I've given myself some clearance there at the bump stops, so both sides are now got about 1 inch, and we're back to everything being equal. There's probably only one other aspect to all of this, guys, and that's if you need to re-index. So in other words, if these are all the way up in there already and you can't lift them up any further, it's just a matter of taking this bolt right out. You know, those nuts up there, just take them right out, take this right out, let this sit down. It'll drop down here enough for you to be able to pull it back. You take the rubber grommet off, or the rubber sleeve off the other end up there. So you'll need to pull this rubber grommet back like I'm doing here, and what that does is then, if I can just get it all the way back, is then it exposes the spline and what I call a socket here. So this whole bar slides back that way, and then you can twist it around, so you're twisting it towards the mid-center of the car, which then lowers the arm at the other end down even further that way, which gives you more opportunity to lift it up. So passenger side and driver side twist in, and it's always a good idea, guys, to before you take this out of here, and it's all greased up by the way, before you take this out of here, give it a wipe and then put a mark, get a white texture or something, a white paint pen, and put a mark on here where you started from. That way when you twist it, when you re-index it, so you take it, slide it back, and then turn it, probably 1 tooth would probably be enough to start with, or maybe 2 depending on how far it is. Then you'll know where you started and where you've got to. So if you do need to flip it back a tooth or whatever on the spine, then you've got a point of reference. This will drop all the way down, right, and it'll be hard to get back up because the bolt's not long enough. I usually just put a bottle jack under this part here on a block of wood on the ground. Bit dodgy, but it works, and it gets you enough to get the bolt up in there at least, and to get the nut on top. And then once you get the nut on top, then you're good to go. You can start doing that up. So that's how you re-index as well. So look, this whole job is not hard at all, really. It's quite easy. It's just, yeah, just getting the right lift, and then also, you know, what I was suggesting before about the bump stops, trimming them. You know, it's probably not optimal, but most people do it just to give themselves that extra clearance. So anyway, that's the job done. So I'll just you know, and just pop this rubber seal back on, make sure it clips on back nice, and just to keep it, make sure you grease it up when you put it back into, as the cockies fly over. It's important to make sure you have no weight on any of this stuff, so you need that front hub just hanging. As I said, no need to take the wheels off, but as long as it's off the ground, as long as there's no pressure on it, there's no weight on it, because by doing that, and if you start doing this up and down, you're putting a lot of strain on that bolt, and also the head of the nut. You can see over time here that nut's not rounded off, but I've actually had to incorporate some nice thick washers in here as well, because this little piece here started to eat away. I don't want to damage it in any way, because, you know, as I say, there's a lot of torsion in this, and you don't want that bolt snapping and so forth. But anyway, okay, so I've rattled on enough. I don't think there's much else I can discuss, and we'll leave it at that. And if you are happy with what you saw today, please like and please subscribe. So you know, it goes a long way to helping the channel if you do.